The shocking truth has been revealed behind the Toronto Maple Leafs getting screwed by the NHL in the Florida series. And while it's absolutely no surprise and no secret that the Florida Panthers have gotten away with dirty hit after dirty hit, the truth has finally been revealed. And this dates back not only to this series, not only this year, but over a decade ago. We're going to break down exactly what that is and discuss some wild evidence that has risen to the surface of the news cycle, but also we're going to discuss how this has massive implications not only for this season, not next season, but seasons beyond that. And it doesn't just involve the Leafs, it involves the entire NHL. So a ton to go over today. You're going to want to stay tuned for the whole video as it keeps getting crazier, ladies and gentlemen. But what also keeps getting crazier is how great you guys have been supporting the channel. If you're part of the 70% who aren't subscribed to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We are on the road to 18,000 subscribers. If you're enjoying videos like this and videos in general, daily Leafs content, make sure to hit the subscribe button. You guys have been absolutely fantastic. You've been beasts. Thank you guys very much. Darius, this is a wild one. Now, we had a video today. There's been, it's no secret, the entire series, and not only this series, against the Tampa Bay Lightning as well, which is something that we haven't really talked about. It's been, dirty the whole playoff run for the Florida Panthers, and it all cultivated in the NHL finding Max Domi of all players. Yes, he had a dirty hit. It wasn't great. But after dirty hit, injuring the Leafs starting goaltender, who not only was having a great playoff series, but the series of his career after he worked years to try to get into this position, Max Domi, the Leafs were the one who ended up with a fine a few games later. And we have some things to get into today. And you can see the date there. This dates back to over 10 years ago, a decade and a half ago, surrounding some, corruption, if you want to talk about it, that is still relevant today between the Leafs and, in this case, Marc Savard, which is some crazy information. I'll let you dive into it here, but this is absolutely ridiculous, and it sheds some light onto the scandal that's happening across the NHL, and it makes some sense as to why some of these things are happening.
Yeah, a lot of people, and I wanted to bring this up because it's public information. This article has been out there for 15 years at this point. Obviously, the emails have been, released as well, so we're going to dive into those. But this is from Greg Wyshynski, and obviously Tyler Dello did some work on this as well. And this, to start at first, obviously at the NHL. Colin Campbell works at the NHL, and he is the VP of hockey operations for the NHL. Holds a very high position, highly regarded within the NHL, right? His son, who used to play for the Boston Bruins around this time when they won the Stanley Cup, is Gregory Campbell. And now, conveniently enough, he is the assistant general manager of the Florida Panthers around the time that the Florida Panthers started getting good again and when they got Matthew Tkachuk, right? So conveniently, the Florida Panthers seem to be favored in the NHL, not just against the Maple Leafs, right? But against every other team. They've gone to the Stanley Cup final and beat everyone up. They were, breaking bones and all of that, making dirty plays, dirty hits and all that. And it's very reminiscent of what the Boston Bruins were doing about 15 years ago when they trucked through the playoffs and were breaking people's necks, not getting suspended, anything like that. And then they ended up winning the Stanley Cup. So, conflict of interest there, that is for sure. But it gets a little bit crazier as you go through the article, which now includes Marc Savard, which is now the assistant coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And they both, father and son, have a very open grudge against Marc Savard as well. And some of the emails in this article are shocking that Colin Campbell sent to the Department of Player Safety at the time. And about the officiating, I should say, actually, about the officiating in these games as it pertains to his son getting some penalties. So some of them are pretty shocking. And how does this all play into the Department of Player Safety now? Well, George Peros, he is the guy that runs it. It was Brendan Shanahan, who is now the Leafs, obviously, president. But now it is George Peros, who, played for the Florida Panthers, likes the Florida Panthers, got knocked out by Colton Orr some years ago, probably a decade ago at this point, who was on the Toronto Maple Leafs, knocked out Colton. It was an embarrassing moment for him. And, there's a lot of things that, a lot of people say Leaf fans like to cry about stuff and stuff like that. But there is, a different rule book here for certain teams, like Nazem Kadri. Twice in a row, he was suspended for the rest of a playoff series. It's never happened before. It's never going to happen ever again, right? These are just things that the Leafs have to deal with because there's a different rule book because of the people who are in place in the league and Department of Player Safety. So again, some of the emails we'll get to are pretty shocking, but there is something here.
Yeah, and we'll dive into some of those now. We can preface it by saying, can we confirm 100% that something crazy is going on? No, but with the evidence that's, evidence both watching the series and dating back here, at the very least, there's some weird things happening. I'm not saying this is necessarily a full grudge just against the Toronto Maple Leafs. It goes against other teams as well. But like you mentioned, you can see here, most scandalously, they reveal a long-standing grudge Campbell holds against Bruins center Marc Savard, and fans across the NHL are now wondering if that grudge may have come into play when Campbell let Matt Cook off without a suspension. Now, how this, of course, pertains now, Marc Savard is a coach on the Toronto Maple Leafs, and we're seeing hit after hit. So not only is there a conflict of interest favoring the Florida Panthers and why they may get away with hits, there is clearly some bad blood, according to this article, between Marc Savard, well, most notably between people in the permanent player safety and all the way up there in these different areas, and Marc Savard, which is very interesting now because, again, no one's talking about the Marc Savard part of this, which we all know. Most people know about, of course, a little bit of interesting things between the Department of Player Safety in Florida. I'll call it interesting things. That's the best way I can put it there, whether that's, of course, things being maybe not right, not justice. But let's dive into some of the emails here. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Now, you can feel free to pause and read the whole thing. I'm going to read some of it here. So this is to Stephen Walcom, and this is, of course, Toronto regarding delayed penalties. A bend in the road is a dead end if you round the corner and Dean Warren is standing there. Your answer regarding his high stick calls and the score of the game were horse, you can obviously shit.
Bleep.
The third call on redacted player was while they were down 5-4 on a defensive zone faceoff versus that fake artist I had in the biggest faker going. Now, feel free to read the rest of it. I want to hear your thoughts on this email. If you're a bit confused about what this email means, maybe you can clarify, Darius.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of people like Tyler Deller were going back and kind of doing research and looking at the penalties, and he's referring to Gregory Campbell, his son, and the biggest faker being Marc Savard of Boston Bruins at the time. So there's some bad blood there. There's a grudge. They hold a grudge against the assistant coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I don't think that's gone away. And again, I think that, when you look back at the Boston Bruins a couple of years ago, I say a couple of years ago, 15 years ago at this point when they won the Stanley Cup, there was, some favoritism there. They kind of trucked through the playoffs. They did whatever they wanted. They beat the living hell out of the Vancouver Canucks, were breaking necks, all of that. Of course, the Aaron Rome thing, I know that, I acknowledge that. But at the same time, whenever the Vancouver Canucks were trying to come back with physicality of their own, there was a penalty. There was a penalty. There was a penalty. And that's kind of what you're seeing now. And not just against the Toronto Maple Leafs, but other teams as well, where the Florida Panthers are able to do whatever they want. There will be no consequences. But whenever the other team wants to push back to get themselves back into the series, you're going to be called for a penalty. You're going to be fined. You're going to be suspended. And should Max Domi have been suspended for that? Maybe. We can debate that till we're blue in the face. Both fan bases, people who aren't fans of the Panthers or the Leafs, you absolutely can. It's a dangerous hit. It's a dirty hit, honestly, late in the game. Absolutely. I do agree with that, the Max Domi one. But throughout the game, there's a lot of dirty stuff. There's elbows flying from the Florida Panthers, and it's not going to be a problem until it connects. And then you have Matthew Tkachuk. That was another dirty hit by, Bobby McMahon. I can acknowledge that the Leafs were doing a couple dirty things as well, but they're trying to get themselves back in the series. Opening the door. You're never going to have a defenseman, change for a guy who's playing forward. That would never happen. He opened the door on purpose to see if Nylander would get hurt there. Now, there's this as well in the game 4. Kachuk is making the throat slash gesture to somebody off camera here. We don't know. He's making the throat slash gesture.
Nylander, I think.
If you can, yeah, to
Bobby
Nylander,
McMahon, apparently.
maybe Bobby McMahon, to somebody. He's making the throat slash gesture. If you watch the video, you can see that he's doing that. Are they going to follow the same precedent that they set a few years ago with Nazem Kadri when he did the same thing and then they ended up fining him as well? Are they going to do that? Is Matthew Tkachuk going to get fined? I didn't hear anything about that. So these are the things we're talking about. Yes, the Maple Leafs, Bobby McMahon, Max Domi, they threw some dangerous hits. We can acknowledge that, right? But the Florida Panthers, if you want to do a little bit of a scoreboard in terms of, dirty plays, here's an elbow about to fly at, one of your best players in John Tavares from Evan Rodriguez, right? So that is a blatant elbow. Obviously, Kulikov on Marner. It's not going to be a problem unless somebody gets knocked out and is out for the series. Then they're going to have to address it. But until then, the league won't do anything to the Florida Panthers. And it's a thing. And it's happened to other teams, not just against the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, and obviously, we've went through a lot of these clips at nauseum. And it's not great when you have Marc Savard now, the coach of the Leafs. And even if you're a fan of another team in the NHL, it's been something that you have fans, on Reddit and just around the league as well that are saying, hey, they investigated themselves and found no wrongdoing, guys. It's fine. And did it in time to take the 2011 Stanley Cup on a yacht. Nope, no conflict of interest here. And that clearly, is an Edmonton fan, according to their Reddit thing. If whatever the name Redditors out there, you can let me know exactly what that's called. But regardless of that, it's happening all the way through. And I keep bringing up this one. This is another one that happened off, camera. And that's the thing. The unfortunate reality is the Panthers have gotten really, really good at doing it when people don't notice. And that's why or do notice and the refs just don't care. And that's why the hit was brutal. You mentioned it. I want to dive into it again because it's a much bigger deal than I think people are making it out to be. Is he going to get, you asked the question, the rhetorical one, I'm sure. Is he going to get suspended like Kadri? Absolutely not. It's the, it's the Florida Panthers. They're never going to get suspended for something like that. But it is it is quite frankly ridiculous. And you can see here again, I'll read out the full thing. I think this fell way under the radar last night and should be talked about more. Kachuk does a throat slash motion while pointing at McMahon. And of course, that should happen with Nazem Kadri. You might even have another video coming out on this. There's the amount of ridiculous things like this is out of hand. And also this here, where you can see here, why isn't this being there's a lot of tweets, why isn't this being talked about more? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring this to light here. This is less than 5 seconds after a non-icing face-off, and no players changed for over 20 seconds after this image. He opens the door with the intent to injure. And this is, of course, again, I don't love going through, hyper-analyzing each play and saying, why is it? But it's at the point now where there are clear dirty plays. The difference between this and, the refs missing calls and all these different things. This is blatant. There is evidence to back it up from years and years ago. And it's at the point now where if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, and if you're any fan across the NHL, you don't even have to be involved in this series. It's about time something happens. And hopefully, by bringing attention to it, not just, us, but everybody out there, it's slowly but surely, creeping up, and it's frustrating that it's kind of had to come to this one. And it's a very good playoff series, although many injuries, and it all cultivated with the Anthony Stolarz one that, guess what? No suspension there. And even if you want to say the Sam Bennett one might have been unintentional because they're close friends, if you want to go on that route, sure. You can look at the Kulikov elbow, which was, you could argue, was by far the worst and clearly the most intentional one. John Tavares opening the door, even if you want to say opening the door is kind of arbitrary. There's so many out there. We can make a 25-minute video of all these examples if you want to dive into each and every one of them. So it's a scandal here, and this evidence it's pretty jarring. Even if there's no connection at this point, this is something that you never want to see, and it shouldn't be a thing. And that's why some people say that the NHL is fantastic to watch, but the league side of it needs some work.
Yeah, and I mean, some people could think there is no connection. There's a connection. The VP of Hockey Operations is the father of the assistant general manager of the Florida Panthers. Let's make no mistake about it. And he's defended him in the past, much like any father should with their son. But you can't, interfere in the league, right? Like, you just can't do that. Then that's a Mickey Mouse league, and that's like no better than a beer league that you might play in, right? The opening of the door thing, to me, with the Nylander play is another thing that you don't even have to hyper-analyze. If you take a look at it and you watch the play over, there is no world where a forward is going to change on the defensive side of the bench where that door should open. That makes absolutely no sense to me. The forward would change on the forward door, which would be near center ice at this point in the game. Obviously, you switch in the second period, but there's no world where that door should have opened, where Miklos should be opening that door at that time. That makes no sense to me because, again, that was a forward who was checking Nylander. So, again, you don't have to hyper-analyze it. You just take a look at that and you go, why did the door open? That's crazy. So, obviously, you can't call everything if you're the officials. I understand that, but the Florida Panthers understand that. That's for sure. And they know that nothing's going to happen. There's going to be no fines thrown their way, no suspensions, right? They can almost do whatever they want freely because, as you can see here, elbows are flying at John Tavares. The Kulikov one on Marner is insane. If that connected, right, I mean, that is just, if this connected, that is just insane. Like, that is so blatant to me. But again, are some of the hits going the other way dirty as well? The McMahon one is not a good hit. The Max Domi hit is not a good hit. The interference on OEL, it's not a smart play. It's not a good play, right? It's not a headshot though, right? So there is a difference there. There's certainly a difference. And for out of this entire series, the only person or team to get fined or suspended being Max Domi of the Leafs for that hit at the end of the game is absolutely insane. Because a lot of people are making the call as well, saying, it's late in the game. There's a couple seconds left. What about the Matthew Tkachuk thing where he slew-footed Mitch Marner? It's the exact same thing. There was only a couple seconds left, right? So it's a two-way street here. So let's look at it that way. And you can see that, the Florida Panthers are kind of getting their way here.
And the problem is it hasn't been a two-way street. And that's been, I think, the issue. Yeah, Bobby McMahon had some bad hits. OEL, I mean, it's just classic, interference to me, at least. And obviously, Evan Rodriguez, he went down with an injury. So maybe hopefully he's okay. Of course, you never want to risk injuries on any of these guys. But it's bad that we've had, multiple clips of things going wrong. And again, the biggest thing is, you mentioned it, the refs, I don't blame them for not calling the whatever, I don't even know what the term is for this, but whatever this penalty could have been, unsportsmanlike conduct, whatever it would have been. I don't blame them for not calling that penalty, but at some point the league, they're allowed to go back and look at things that aren't called penalties. We've seen it before, all these different things, and the precedent is crazy. Also, just to throw it out there, which, might land into some of the bias thing. You mentioned a player hit the referee's shins, doesn't get suspended. I don't even know if he got fined. And then
Nothing.
Max Domi is out here getting fined the maximum amount allowable under the CBA. Now, you can, of course, go over that if they bring it to a hearing. They didn't. I mean, the roof would have came off Toronto if he got suspended for that, which, wouldn't have happened. I think the optics are too bad then. And maybe if this is true, then there would have been that there. there's no consistency, and it is a little bit wild to me. You make physical contact with a ref, and that doesn't have any. It's such a weird thing that's going on here, and I can guarantee you as well. Maybe they're using this in case a Florida Panther makes physical contact with their stick or something on a ref. So they can say, "Hey, we didn't suspend him, so let's keep Florida happy as well." But it's a scandal that we're shedding light on and has to continue to be, and we're going to keep shedding light on it until it stops. And there's a difference between physical hockey that is fine, like they're teetering the line there, and blatant hits to the head. And I mean, it's more on the Department of Player Safety than it is Florida, because in Florida's mind, they're probably just thinking, hey, this is working. We're going to try to win another cup again, which I can't necessarily blame them for, although I wouldn't say it's
Right.
an ethical approach to go about it.
No, but who cares about ethics if you're trying to win a Stanley Cup, right? I'm just saying that this is something that we're going to keep bringing to light because it keeps happening and it's very obvious at this point if you watch the game. So bring up a good point about Mason Marchment too. You know, in yesterday's game where they're playing the Winnipeg Jets, a call didn't go his way and he quite literally hit an official with his stick. And the minimum suspension for that is 10 games. And they came out and said that that's a little harsh for the playoffs, so we're not going to suspend them at all. Why do we have a rule book then? I mean, it's in the rules. It was a definite suspension. Remember when David Clarkson came off the bench and he got an automatic 10-game suspension, right? It doesn't matter unless it's the Leafs, I guess. Oh, it's too harsh. Can't give him 10 games. He hit an official. And I like Mason Marchment. I think he's a great player. He's a former Maple Leaf as well. But he should probably be suspended for that because he quite literally hit an official with his stick. So there's just a lot going on right now. And I think that the league will probably be better off with some of these guys out of positions of power. I think that is quite obvious, but who knows when that's going to happen.
Yeah, or have a stern talking to, and also throw it in there. The Leafs are 0-9 or 0-10 in playoff games with Wes McCauley reffing them, which I'm not saying it's the same thing, but there's a lot of weird things going on.
Too many coincidences.
Yeah, too many of those. So let us know down below what your thoughts are on this. It was a bit of a different style of video here, but again, it's at a point now where we're going to keep doing it because there's too much to talk about and all these different incidences that no one's talking about. We're going to keep bringing to light. But let us know down below what your thoughts are. Very interested to see. We're reading all the comments, and there's a lot of them. So excited to talk to you guys down there. See you guys later.